Shane? Sorry.
Not quite yet. Yeah, not
Oh,
quite yet.
sorry.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
I was just making sure that you.
I've got it ready. Yeah.
I mean, it's good fun dropping you in it, but
Yeah. But I was ready.
okay. Sharon's not with us yet, but I think she probably. I think she was planning to be, but she's seen some of what I'm going to cover anyway. So, what I thought would be useful. Are you okay for me to start, Richard? Do you think?
Yeah. No. Yeah. I should do. Yeah. Carry on.
Okay. Well, we've got quite a lot to cover today, and what obviously we've got, as ever, we've got some new people, some people that didn't attend the last one, which was 8 weeks ago. And so I'd like to just spend a few minutes just bringing everybody up to speed with where we're at, and then we can open up the sort of discussion to the normal sort of process, if that's okay. What I thought I'd do is just give people an update on the progress that we've been making, and also some interesting news that I've got this morning from Mr. Gove, not directly, by the way. Just to clarify, anybody that isn't too familiar with the way we're structured, we've got different stakeholder groups. So although this is the construction working group, it's not full of constructors. The principle is that each of the working groups is made up of people who have got an active interest in that part of the process. And in many cases, well, in all of the cases, we've got quite a cross-disciplinary engagement in each of the working groups. And the working groups themselves are meeting every 8 weeks. So in essence, that means that because we've got 6 working groups, there's one every other week sort of thing. In fact, a little bit more than that. And then underneath the working groups, we've got the work streams who are tackling individual tasks. And the work streams that we've been working through, there's data standards, where we've been developing data templates and the like, and also looking at things like O&M handover. We've got MMC, where we've done quite a lot of work, probably largely last year. So we need to resurrect that. And we've got some things that are coming through from the work that certainly we've been doing at Active Plan with Lang O'Rourke that's very exciting, product-based building solutions. The fire safety is probably the most active work that we've been doing over this last year or so, and we've got 5 roundtable workshops happening at Digital Construction Week. So UK BIM Alliance have asked us to run some workshops there on the Thursday, which is the 19th of May. So I'll explain about that a little bit later. Sustainability, we've had a working group working on sustainability, and we produced basically a bit of an awareness survey. But what we've decided to do with the sustainability, it's such a big topic. It's a major work stream in itself. So what we've done is tied together with another group that is really driving that, called Zero Construct, which is helping us with that. So we're working with them on that, and then we've got a number of new ones that are coming through now. One for change management, another looking at the digital O&M and the digital records. So we've now got Yarrick, who's an electrical engineer, electrical contractor, going to be working alongside Paul, who's in this meeting now, to look at that change management side of things. So those are the activities that we've got going on. This is the Zero website, so I can give you details of this, but it's a very active membership, and we helped establish it back in October last year. So we've got a big stand at Digital Construction Week that's focused on Zero Construct. And Richard, would you like to just talk through what we've been doing with the BIM4Housing site?
BIM4Housing site, yeah. Shall I share my screen then?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Tell me if you can see that.
Yep.
Right, this is the BIM4Housing site. As you can see, you are the groups. If we go through to groups, and we go down to the construction group, this has got actually Tom Cannon's name on it, who was a very effective leader up until 6 weeks ago, George.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tom's set his own business up. He's moved on, and Andy from Hill is on the call at the moment as well. So Andy's now taken over that responsibility, I think, and probably more.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, I'm on the call, and actually Jan Stevens is now on the call, who is Hill's new BIM manager, taking over from Tom.
So, excellent.
So Jan is on the call, sitting next to me on the call as well. So yeah, we've kind of backfilled Tom's position now.
Great. Okay. So I think yeah. So let's press on from there then, Richard. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, and this is the construction group subsite. So that's your mission statement, if you like, which obviously you can update. A Q&A done with Tom last year. Now, this is what we're doing new. After every meeting, the leaders of the group will get the video, a transcript of the meeting, and a high point, kind of a minutes of the meeting, which they can use to send out to just as a document itself to the attendees and non-attendees of a meeting, so to keep up to date with any action points put on it as well. But that'll be on the website. This is obviously last meeting, and each meeting will go up there, so anyone anywhere can within the group can look at that and see where you've got up to, what's happened, and what's planned for the future, what actions are coming up. So we're trying to encourage actually engagement with the website as a means of we put stuff on Teams and it's not always looked at, and then some people can't access it for one reason or another. If it's up on the website, then it's public and everyone can see what's going on. Okay.
Yeah, can you go onto Black Box?
Oh, Black Box, yes, sorry. Sorry, I've got to sign in. So you did catch me on the hop then, didn't you, George?
Sorry.
It's okay. I can't remember my password.
You want me to do it? Or are you okay?
No, I think I've done it. Yeah. Right, let me go to the home page. There we go. So this has been for Housing Black Box. We have currently 6 sections. Do you want me to go through each one, George?
No, I don't think so. I think probably look at lessons learned, because that's the one we're trying to get people to, and also the publications.
Okay, this is the lessons learned, which I can't seem to scroll down on. Hold on. Lessons learned. We've got asset type AOV being blocked by external scaffold, solution, inform method statements. Photos can be added, comments, if you want to make a comment on that.
If you scroll down a bit, Richard, sorry, you'll see that there's quite a few photos that have been.
Oh, the ones, yeah, yeah. There we go.
So we've got quite a few there of examples. So the point about this, that we're learning from this. You know, this is not a professional site because we're doing this, you know, as part just really you know, pro bono sort of thing. But what we're doing here, we've got examples here. If you click on maybe one of those, you can see you've got penetration seals in many cases that have been put up there that we can, you know, potentially learn from. Okay, that was it really, I think.
Publications?
Sorry, also we've got publications as well, which is where we've got all of the reports that have been produced, which I think most of you have probably seen before, but if not, that's where you go to download them. And
also to comment, if you want to add comments or any amendments that you think need to be made, that's the place to do it.
Yeah,
they're dynamic documents. They're not nothing on, none of our publications are ever finished because by definition everything's changing.
Okay, thank you, Richard.
Okay.
Yeah, so the interesting thing here is you might have seen this before. This was produced by the FIS, Finishers Interiors group, and it's looking at what the Defective Premises Act is going to be introducing, and the potential or the implications on developers and constructors. And I had an email this morning, which this is a copy of an email that Michael Gove sent last week to CA, and you'll basically see that he's now ramping things up as far as the Construction Products Association is concerned. And basically, Peter had been taking the position that manufacturers are going to struggle to be able to pay into the fund, and they're taking a very hard line with them. And I think that this is indicative of the fact that we're going to need to be. This is the position the government's going to be taking, so we need to be aware of that. So the work that we're all trying to do here, I think, is to see how we can satisfy the need of the new regulator to develop and provide structured digital information. And most of you, I think, on this call are aware of the difference between structured digital information and PDF documents. But the difference that I see between the two is that for you to read a PDF document, you need to be able to have the intelligence to interpret that. So in other words, the document itself is not intelligent, the document is dumb, and you as a human interpret what you need to interpret from the document. Whereas what we want to try and do is turn the documents themselves into something that's intelligent and machine readable, so we don't need to have people interpreting the information where they could make mistakes, or certainly it's a big overhead on the process. So the work that we've been doing in terms of saying what information is required, the Golden Thread initiative that we've been working on is actually looking at what data is needed, and there's some changes that are being fed through, have been fed through to the government in terms of what recommendations, what data is needed to support the safety case. Also, some examples of how visual records can be used to evidence that things have been done properly. And I think this is going to be increasingly important with the Defective Premises Act to be able to record things properly. And also, and this is probably one of the key things that we need to be aware of, is that we're moving away from having specifications being performance specifications after work stage 4 to having to be prescriptive, and this is the direction of travel that Paul and Mark have been working on within the Tier 1 group that we can perhaps talk about shortly, Paul, if you wouldn't mind. And this is what has been developed through the work we've been doing with the Golden Thread initiative. So for those of you, I think most of you have seen this or may have seen this before, but the important point here is that you've got the REBA plan of work across the top, but then you've got the gateways where the regulator is going to be requiring to be able to audit the information before you get approval to move on to the next stage. And the critical one for the construction group, I would suggest, is Gateway 2. Gateway 2, unless the regulator is going to be satisfied that what gets built is going to be safe, it's a no-go, or it's a stop-start initiative there. And then at handover, again, we won't be able to get a handover certificate, a completion certificate, unless they're satisfied that the building is going to be safe, which is a real challenge. How do you demonstrate that? This is just an example. This isn't published yet, but this is what, again, we fed back to the government. This is part of the different stakeholders within the Golden Thread initiative. And you'll see here that at Gateway 2, which is the end of work stage 4, they're expecting the design to be complete. And therefore, and that would include the fire stopping, for example, which naturally means that we have to have reliable information in terms of coordinating building services, which some of the team that are on this call we've been working with, trying to wrangle how best we can work that through, because the building services contractors, for example, aren't procured until after work stage 4 into work stage 5, and that's causing a lot of the defect issues. So what we've been doing is working with subject matter experts. Some of you are on this call now, and we've produced the publications that Richard's just shown you on the website. And the process that we've taken, this was guidance from the HSE, who are employing the regulators, is to look at things from a risk perspective. So what is the risk? Let's say the spread of smoke. One of the ways of addressing that, a key way of addressing it, is compartmentation. What do we need to ensure is in place and is going to perform properly to act to form that compartmentation? And it's not just one thing. It's not just the fire door, it's the firewall, it's the whole thing, and also the information about that particular asset as well. So that's why we talk about having machine readable data that we can then use to validate and test to see if the right information on a smoke stop on a fire door has actually been provided. We don't want to have to manually check that. And each of these risks may have several different ways of mitigating, and also it may support different other types of risk as well. So that's the mindset that we're coming at, which we're going to be covering in the Digital Construction Week effort. Within BIM4Housing, we've got the duty holders. So these are people who are working within, for example, housing associations or local authorities, and have got the legal liability, which does seem to be ramping up, for making sure that buildings are delivered safely. And also, we've got the group of Tier 1 contractors who have been collaborating to try and address ways that they can help their supply chain to provide them with better quality information. And we're treating the information as important a deliverable as the physical building. So just at the moment, as this whole process is in place to make sure that defects, physical defects, are picked up and addressed and reduced, we need to be doing the same with information quality. So that group has formed some specific work streams that are looking at the detailed technical design side of things. We've then got the contractual work stream, which is meeting on Monday. And also from that, we're trying to pull that into an education work stream. So I'm going to hand over to Paul McSolly in a few minutes, and Paul and Mark perhaps could just explain what we're trying to do in that area. The way I think that we can achieve this is by learning from other industries and having progressive validation and assurance of the information. So, for example, if we've got some requirements, if we can define at the outset what information we require from a product manufacturer, then we can provide that to the product manufacturer in a form that they can easily use and then reuse on future jobs. So rather than the product manufacturer providing different information, or the same information perhaps in a different format than a similar product manufacturer, we can then start to standardize the way that information is being provided. And then when it then gets used by the designers during work stage 4 to work up the final products that are actually going to be installed, it's possible then to tie that back to the product libraries, and also then for subcontractors to then go through maybe a validated technical submittal or technical deviation process, so that we can then ensure that what gets bought is what gets installed and moved forward. So we're collaborating with people like Travis Perkins to help with that, and also with a lot of the big manufacturers through an international standards organization called ETIM. So the principal idea is that we then, if we can create objects that hold data, we can therefore initially, which is the main driver of BIM level 2, was asset management. So what we're doing in terms of recording where doors are and what they contain is already being gathered. That's part of the fundamental process. So if we're going to do that, we then pick up the information that's needed for fire safety and also reducing carbon. And the work that we've been doing in this area has been with the housing associations, with the HACT working group, and also to be able to tie together into all of the other standards data dictionaries. This is the data standards work stream that have been doing this, so that we can end up with information that is coming through from the IFC libraries, but also from MBS, so that we're standardizing classification, from SIBSI, so the BIM4Hawk work, from MBA, from RICS with NRM, and also, as I was saying here, this is the wholesalers classification system. So the point is that different people have got different ways of looking at information, and what we're then doing is bringing that together. So these are all valid ways of looking at information, declarations of performance and environmental product declarations, but we'll pull those together into the BRE templater, which is also being used by the CPA to create standardized product data. And overall, where we're going with that, you've probably seen this graphic before. What we're doing with this is to standardize the way product information is being created so that we can use it in all sorts of different ways. And finally, on the 19th, Thursday the 19th of May, we've been asked by UK BIM Alliance to run 5 roundtables for an hour to actually go through and track a particular risk, which is the spread of smoke, through the different asset types that are protecting against it, and then understand from each of these stakeholder groups what information they require to create that, to carry that out. So it's and what we're hoping to do is over the next few weeks do some preparation for that, so that when we hit the ground at Digital Construction Week, and if you're attending and if you can attend, it'd be fantastic if you could join the roundtables. But even if you're not, you can contribute virtually beforehand, so that we can then have a coherent answer. So I'm going to stop there. Paul or Mark, or, in fact, I'll be clearer. Paul, could you just explain what we're trying to do in the?
I certainly was. I'm going to share my screen, if that's okay, my friend.
Please.
1 second, let's go to the first one. So going back to what you said earlier here, George, it was about, if you remember, we did originally all the different risk categories, all the different areas of, you know, the construction that was there. I've bridged it out. I've gone away and started looking at smoke control dampers, smoke control ducts, because I think the biggest thing for us as you know, the technical group, is that each one's got its own field of how you apply the rules. And this is what we said before, is that when you look at, say, actually, I'll give you an even better template example to show you. When you look at things like, you know, fire dampers being the classic ones, you can't apply the field of application rules from the fire stopper into a fire damper, because it doesn't cover smoke control dampers, it doesn't cover penetration seals. It's a different thing altogether. And I think my biggest beef with the whole thing that was going on was that we were still using the word fire stopping in the industry quite blasé, like you get an LDD or another company in that does fire stopping, they think they're going to solve all your problems. They clearly can't, because it's outside their field of expertise. So the whole purpose in this whole group is to go away and start looking at the complications of how kit's been selected. And what I've ended up doing, and I've got some of the stuff here, and I will send this over to you, Mark. I just got to finish tailoring it. Is about how you select a componentry, how you get there for what you're actually looking for, how you select it with the walls, and also what the field of application issues are that go with it. Because I think we've covered before some of these subjects like fire stopping and fire dampers. What we haven't covered is things like smoke control and smoke control dampers. What I'm going to do, George, as well, going back to the original thing about risk and mitigation, and I do apologise because I've got 2 sheets muddled up here. But what I've started to do is get the purpose groups into it, and I'm going to start going through the risk flow across the right-hand side about what the actual risk is against each purpose group. Because I think, you know, there's residential, there's high-rise building, but actually it's not the same thing if you're in hospitals. It's not the same thing if you're in, you know, labs or schools. It's completely different in commercial offices as well, how the smoke risk is actually ascertained. A good example is probably student blocks, because essentially the whole smoke risk is the biggest issue. So that's the bit I'm kind of working to get into a bit of an order at the moment. And the whole purpose it will be at the end is actually, if I can get it right, George, I can have each subject listed out and a flow of how you select it and how you get to the whole thread part of it, if that makes sense. and there'll be something very rudimentary that will go through that kind of. It will be split up so you can look at the purpose group and try and follow it along, if that makes sense. You know, and I think you said earlier with the construction product associations, we did a big consultation with Sibsy on it. With, I think it was with Hull at the time. Is that they didn't have enough information on the DOPs for people to actually select the right kit appropriate for the circumstances for which you're installing it. And I think everyone's had the problem where you've put, whether it's even if it's fire stopping, you know, for general pipes and wires, because that's what I said earlier. This is the bit we've got to make clear for everyone, is that even when you talk about the Part 3 stuff, trunking, busbar and conduits have different field of application rules, even though it's within the same test standard. It's not until you go through it or you go, wow, you know. So I've got some external parties giving me some advice on it as well. But and I will, Mark, I will bring you into it, because unfortunately I think we've had Easter and I've had a bit of time out as well. So me and Mark probably need to sit down in a bit more detail all of this as well, so we can kind of flow through it all. So apologies, Mark, I haven't really been in touch over the last couple of weeks. That'd be my fault.
Mark, would you like to say something just to reinforce your thoughts on this? Because I know that you've been doing a lot of work as well.
Yeah.
Do you mean in sort of it's a slightly different direction? But my sort of general thoughts in terms of the things that really concern me as a tier 1 contractor, which sort of moves away from this ever so slightly, but it goes back to the point over the Gateway 2 stop go, whatever we're going to call it. That to me is one of the sort of the real primary issues that I'm being asked a lot of questions about. You know, the concept and the slide that you put up earlier of completing stage 4 design, which, let's face it, stage 4, the end of stage 4 is the end of the design process, and completing that in such a way as to be able to make a submission for Gateway 2 is so far removed from what most people are used to doing. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but the majority of schemes have a very heavy overlap between stage 4 and stage 5. Admittedly, sometimes that's where some of our problems come from. So maybe we're heading in the right direction with that. But I do have a worry that our clients have still got programs for various reasons that they need to achieve. So what therefore happens to the design program that is being kind of squashed down at the front end? So that is a massive worry for me. And then just related to that in terms of program, we also do not know. And I think in terms of things that we do not know, we don't know how long this submission and the approval of that submission will actually take. You know, I sort of throw it around in my own head that maybe think of it in terms of almost like a statutory planning period, and you could have an 8 to 16 week period. So what are we all doing while we're sitting around for 8 to 16 weeks to get approval on firstly Gateway 2 and then secondly Gateway 3? Interestingly, though, you mentioned that the stop go nature of Gateway 2, but if you read down a little bit in what they've got on the government website, they do also mention the use of a staged approach, which starts bringing you back to where you were. But what the heck does that mean? We don't know. So these are the things that for me are causing me the most problem. I have to admit, you know, a lot of the other work they're doing, the discussions and what we're talking about here, Paul, you can kind of see where we need to get to with those. You know, there's an argument that there's a lot of things that we're doing already. We just need to get bloody better at them. But my big worries are the things we really don't understand.
No, I mean, the big thing is we had the original sort of, if you go back probably 6 months ago, George, the big thing was, you know, we kind of used it as in getting, you know, prescriptive into descriptive early on, because as you say, Mark, yourself, if you haven't accounted for any of this stuff in the early stages of design, whether it's the spatial fit that worries the hell out of me, and it's what causes us the most problems. Because, you know, MEP consultants, no disrespect to them, including architects, they don't bring it all together anymore with a product selection. So therefore, it goes through Gateway 1. It comes out the other end of all of this, you know, stuff that's allegedly going to fit in the building. When you start applying products, it just clearly won't. We've got problems on jobs already with the same issue. I'm sure you have, Mark, as well, because without the product selection, because they all fit completely different and bespoke to how they're tested, you're pretty much
I mean, look, you know, I see all of this as a really good opportunity for the industry, and I don't mean an opportunity for contractors or anybody else. We all need to work together, because for this to work, there's a lot of changes of mindset, and I think, you know, maybe over the years people have drifted into bad habits, the way that so many elements of design are farmed out to others, left for someone else to complete, left for someone else to do, and then going back to, you know, the very heavy overlap between stage 4 and stage 5. We need to think about whether that's actually right, what we've been doing before, and maybe almost reset things here.
I think the other thing is that we're working on projects where the complexity of the information management side of things is considerable, and there's a perception that if you provide a document that sets out how you need everything to be organized, then that will get done. But the guidance that we've got, and the government's invested in a huge amount of guidance. The UK BIM Alliance have been doing some great work in terms of guidance, but who's got the time to actually read it and understand it? And then, you know, even if they do, are there blockers that then you know, get in the way of that? In many cases, in my experience, it can be too high level, and therefore you end up with a lot of interpretation at the project level and at the individual firm level, and the result of that is we don't have the standardization.
It's the sort of touched a nerve there in terms of too high level. I mean, I think the conversation almost has been too high level for too long. I mean, this is what we're looking at here is great, but how many people have gone and attended you know, a seminar or a workshop, something about the building safety bill, and actually, have you actually learned anything different? We're still dealing with things at a high level, whereas what we're talking about here is actually getting down to what we need to do.
Yeah.
Andy, I'm going to pull you in a second. I'd just like to just say one other thing with this. I'm learning a huge amount. I've been in the industry for a long time, but I'm learning a hell of a lot from these different working groups. And the design working group a couple of weeks ago, I was able to replay to them what I've been told about BG6. Now, a lot of people wouldn't really understand what BG6 was, certainly in the design group, which was, you know, architects with a lot of BIM experience were in there, but they're looking at the REBA plan of work as being the delivery process. But in BG6, which is the BISRIA process, you've got three stages during work stage 4. I think a lot of you will know this already. Yeah, Paul's pulled it up there. You've got, or do you want to explain it, Paul?
Well, I think there's probably two things. I did a bit of lecturing on safety the other week on it, because we've got the same issue in the public health fraternity as well. Because I think the whole principle of the A, B, and C originally was always quite simple. You know, for how I think the intent was right, was that if you didn't have a contractor on board, then the consultant would select products that would generically fit. That's all, you know. Then even stage, you know, 4B was about if the specialist wasn't on board, then they just put some generic in. But the whole purpose in the 4C originally, this is the old BD6, not the new one, was that you refreshed the 4A with the actual componentry, you know, the smoke control system, whatever you were using. So the power was then looked at correctly, it was discriminated properly. The whole system was then, you know, one entity. You know, it was commissionable, everything was there. What's kind of happened on the latest one is that because you've got this 1, 2, and 3, and it sort of says feasible generic, coordinated Pacific. What's happened is that, and I think some of this, George, not speaking, you know, out of turn here for a lot of the consultants, is that they don't have the PI that covers them for specialist selection, which is actually your dampers now, your smoke control systems, your smoke control dampers, your sprinklers, your fire alarm. So they're not actually putting anything generic inside the model. They're just showing a block where a duct goes through a wall. They're not actually fully aware of the rule sets around how the wall's constructed in its own right and all the different components. So if you get to the point on coordinated Pacific at the end where you take a contractor on, there's a good chance the original consultant, you know, is unfortunately wouldn't have got it right, which just comes back to your point, Mark, as well, is that if you go through Gateway 1 and you haven't got product selection, you're going to come out the end of Gateway 2 and things just aren't going to fit. Those prescriptive lessons are going to be lost because no one's going to have selected it. And that's the issue that lies with BG6. And I won't speak for Bizria, but I think they're probably aware as well that they're going to need to probably do an update on this when all this we sort of ratify out how this thread's going to work. Because you say yourself, Mark, I think we have been doing procurement wrong for too long, where we bring everyone in at the end after the horse has bolted, then try and retrospectively make it fit. It's the wrong way.
Andy, thank you, Paul.
No problems, mate.
Yeah, sorry, just picking up, I think, on some comments that Mark made. For me, I also don't understand when you start getting complex residential buildings, you cannot use guidance from approved document B as a pattern book, because it doesn't. It's just not, that document is not really suitable for complex, particularly high-rise residential buildings. So you then may sway into, say, BS 9991 and or fire engineered solutions, but the current process is we would engage very early on with a building control body and have very early discussions, and the design is kind of, the fire engineered solutions are worked up in consultation with the building control body so that the final design satisfies their requirements. With the new gateway process, nowhere have I read any opportunity for us to have any early engagement with the building control body that the building safety regulator may appoint, or the building safety regulator as a body itself, prior to Gateway 2. So, you know, for us to develop a completed design, submit it to the building safety regulator for him to consult with the fire authority, and it just get dismissed out of hand, is a huge risk to have a fully completed design without any engagement prior to Gateway 2. And there's nowhere in this, because, you know, the building safety regulator won't have appointed the building control body at that point if he's going to sub it out to a you know, a local authority or an approved inspector. So who do we speak to? And I think it's a big risk to fully design every single element of the building without having had any dialogue, engagement. And I don't see anywhere in the process at the moment that opportunity. So that's a big risk from my point of view that I can see there, because these complex buildings need early engagement and discussion. And then the other one, I think, again, picking up on Mark's point, where you know, that there's mention of a staged kind of submission. I think the reality is that I can't see any other solution but that to happen, because, you know, the so many developments will just not be viable from a funding point of view to have months and months and months of downtime waiting for. I mean, we all, those of us that are within the industry, having to kind of get fire authority consultations through, you know, it is measured in months, if not years. And for funding to be just sat there, you know, and every day that construction is not progressing, that's costing money in terms of funding, both at pre-start and at commencement. I think it's really going to put so many schemes at risk. I think the government are going to have to take, you know, there's going to have to be a softening of that with some sort of staged development. I can't believe that they won't allow piling to start because we haven't decided what specification of fire door we're going to, you know, put on the 15th floor or something. I just can't see it happening in reality. But so yeah, just a couple of points from me there.
That of course brings its own risk, doesn't it? You know, if let's say, great, okay, so we start piling and we can do a number of other activities, but if we're not clear on just how long the process of approval to allow us to carry on is going to take, then as a contractor, there's a yet another risk there. So it comes back to that. To me, lots of high-level discussion, a little hint at the staged approach, but let's get down to some nuts and bolts and try and understand what that actually is going to be. And actually, I'm glad you mentioned on the building safety regulator, that side of things. That's another one for me that's a bit of an unknown, and I wondered whether it's me just not doing enough reading. I've asked the question in various other forums. I think it was something with the NHBC to put a really nice slide up that shows all the relationship, building safety regulator, building inspector, etc. But I don't understand how it works, nuts and bolts, how it's actually going to work, and that's where I'm feeling things are lacking. We need to move forward with that.
Yeah, I mean, presumably there's a financial arrangement. We got someone's got to pay the regulator. We don't know.
Yeah.
Is that a standard scale of fees? Because you never know. An approved inspector's fees may be different to local authority. Do you have to go through a quotation before you then make the submission? As you say, the actual practicalities totally unknown at the minute.
Well, one of the things I've been told, Andy, because I've been talking with the HSE and some of the people that are sort of involved in that process, and I have to say that everybody at the moment is so nervous, of what to say, because you can see this as becoming a very, very hot and political process, and I think it's going to get worse.
Yeah.
But the regulator, that I think they're recruiting 280 more people. This is the HSE. I might have that figure wrong, but it's in the it's three figures anyway, and they're recruiting them from oil and gas, so they're coming in from another a regulated industry. So what we're becoming is a regulated industry. Now, the impact of regulation is huge in terms of evidence and process and everything else that we'd have to do. And I think at the moment we're a long way off being able to deliver that. The challenge is going to be, I think, that the regulator, the people that are coming in, they're going to be used to having good quality information because they've come from an environment where that's an accepted process. And if they don't have that good quality information and they're being asked to take a risk to sign something off, they'll probably be reluctant to do so. And I've also been told that they will then charge on an hourly basis the contractor or the whoever it is that's paying 180 quid an hour apparently is the rate for them to actually do their investigations. So my process with this is for us to try and do as much as we possibly can to eliminate all those questions. And that's really, and I think when we were talking, Mark, on the a couple of weeks ago, I think you said that this is going to drive forward in offsite and modern methods of construction, earlier product selection, and all that sort of stuff. And I think probably that is where we need to get to. I think we need to industrialize the process. At the moment, we've got too much. The way what we've done really, and this is true of BIM as well, what we've done, we've applied information management to a traditional process. We're still doing things in a very similar way than we've probably been doing for, certainly decades. We're applying technology to an established process of where there's a lot of change allowed. It's expected, in fact. It's built into the process that people can swap things out for something else. Whereas in manufacturing industry, they decided not to do that quite a few years ago. And the result was that, they've got quality outcomes. Whereas I think that's one of the things that we need to perhaps be as a collective going back. And the other thing I would say is that Michael Gove's letter to CPA last week certainly shows to me that they're not willing to accept any excuses. So therefore, I think as an industry, we need to be able to go back with some practical ways that we can demonstrate that we're actually delivering, because the CPA have obviously had some challenges with trying to do that, and I've worked with the CPA, and it's a challenging job that they've got, because they're an association of associations, so it's actually quite difficult for them to pull things together. Anyway, has anybody else got any more comments?
I'm going to say one last thing, George. I think that the big thing is, I think for this whole technical piece is that, I think Mark, you said it yourself there very well, is that the problem, even with the regulator, is going to be when we had, I think it was when we did the original sort of early adopters conversations, that if you go to the regulator and you talk about the quality of information, I think it was Lisa there was kind of nodding in the background as well, is that if you give them something and you give them what you know, but it's not actually everything that's involved, then I think the risk to all of us will be the same thing we experience now, where you take, probably a good example is firefighting shafts, where the 2 hours, you know, you've got a shaft inside that's been drawn as 60 minutes, but it's for a 2-hour shaft. It should clearly be 2 hours. They won't necessarily know all of that, but it will come out the woodwork later. So I think we've got to really understand as a collective, as a group, all the questions we should be asking ourselves before you even give it to them. Because otherwise, I think what's happened before in the past, this is just my experience, is that we rely on you know, a manufacturer or someone else to give us the advice, whether it's a, you know, a smoke extract contractor in a shaft or a corridor. We don't necessarily understand the componentry, what should be involved in the first place. So I think, you know, we just got to get, you know, very good at giving that information correctly, the prescriptive to descriptive things that we said earlier. So that was it really, George, for me.
Yeah. Andy, you're a manufacturer. Would you have any comment on that? Andy Scott?
Just that it sounds like we're going back a long way to how things used to be done in some areas, and it sounds like a very good idea. How we're going to get there? The main note I've made from my business point of view is to keep an eye out for this standardization of information. It will be an absolute delight to provide information that's clear and concise and understood. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Andy makes smoke control systems and alarm systems.
Fire alarms.
Fire alarms.
Fire alarms.
Sorry,
Yeah.
fire alarm. Sorry, Andy.
Slightly different.
Yeah, sorry.
Still an hard job, Andy. Andrew, don't get me wrong. You know, it always was a difficult one, because I mean, probably for you, the biggest, like, just to put this as an example, is that quite often we don't get, you know, compartmentation sorted out on risers properly, and by the time it gets to the fact that you realise the risers are all shut, the game's up, isn't it? This is what this is the bit we've got to, you know, kind of get better at as well, you know, to make sure the information's correct as well.
Well, one thing that does occur to me as well is, I don't know if anybody's following what's going on with the, I know we're not in Europe anymore, but what's going on with the construction products regulation, certainly in relation to fire alarms, they're effectively there's been a complete standstill in the development of fire alarm standards now for several years, caused by the fact that the European Commission don't want to be liable for what's in standards. So we're talking about effectively having standards that don't actually do any of the things our current standards do. I'm talking specifically about fire alarm standards now, EM54. So we're talking about going backwards there as well, and possibly not having conformity across the markets of product requirements. In other words, they'll just say, oh, it's got to be safe.
Yeah.
And all that detail as to how we make it safe is going to be in some other document. This isn't going to happen quickly, but it's something we need to keep an eye on, because I'm guessing UK will broadly follow Europe, or will it? Who knows?
Do you mind if I just share how we see all the landscape of all the all the different groups and how they're working together, just to kind of like just be specific about what outputs. I mean, Paul would have seen this, but and I think George, at one of our very first sessions, I think you highlighted it. But look, this is how we see it, because we're on quite a number of the different groups from products. Can you all see that?
Oh yes.
Okay, so this is all the different groups. Now, you mentioned two big things here. Mark mentioned the building safety regulator, the national regulator for construction products. Two things from the MHCLG building safety program, and these are all the different groups, right? So where we're sitting with we sit on the Construction Leadership Council and other groups. You've got the building regulatory advisory. When you look at the building safety, these are all the different groups that are happening, right, at the moment. Yeah, which comes down to all the 13 different working groups, from engineers, installers, fire engineers, and over here you've got building safety regulator, the building safety regulator, HSE, the national regulator for construction products, as we all just spoke about, the residents reference panel, the BS competence, and the building advisory committee. There's so much going on. When you look at, the building safety regulators over here, linking in with the Construction Leadership Council and all the different reforms, that we're obviously over here talking about the golden thread of information, alignment opportunities with UK BIM framework. Then you got the leadership and culture, the competence, the professional indemnity, as Paul's mentioned about, have certain people got certain, PI for all that. And then you got the construction products. When you look at all that, there is so much going on. In the different work streams, and forgive me if you've already seen this, we've tried to map out everything out that's going on that Mace as a business are involved with. We're involved with a number of all these different things to try and say, where can we add influence, and where best to focus, because there's so much going on.
The interesting thing with that, Paul, that's really helpful. The interesting thing with that is that we're looking at this at the moment through the prism at the moment of the topic of fire safety, or safety, right? We've not even touched on carbon.
Yeah, I mean, carbon's, as jobs come in, carbon's our biggest, how should say, disruptor.
Yeah,
because everybody wants a building at 55 kilowatts per meter squared, in terms of operational energy. Embodied carbon, nobody's measuring it in terms of environmental product declarations. That's a huge subject.
it is, and I wasn't throwing it in there to make it, more complex, but just flagging up the fact that at the heart of this is digital information.
Hugely, yeah. It's one string that runs through it. And I've spoken to the top 10 manufacturers, UK worldwide manufacturers, on why they're not producing EPDs. And one EPD costs £7,000. You talk about Grundfos have got 6,000 different types of pumps. They're never going to produce EPDs. So when you talk about that, and if you do, George, I know your famous thing about PDFs. They're just producing them in PDFs. We've tried to partner with One Click LCA to try and put it on, but you soon find out they're just trying to use that for their own benefit. They're not using it for the greater good of the construction industry. So carbon's a huge subject.
I mean, I think for me, we've also got to be careful that we don't create a monster in response to Grenfell, which was a tragedy. But if you kind of compare Grenfell to the Titanic disaster, there were 1,000 odd people died on the Titanic. There were basically 4 key changes to regulation. That's all they had to deal with. They had to make sure there were sufficient lifeboats. The design of the hulls and the bulkheads had to change. They introduced a North Atlantic iceberg watch, and you needed to have a 24-hour manned radio. They were the 4 key things that the industry just had to learn from. You look at the diagram you just put up there, Paul, and I think, again, concern for me is that we create a beast that is so complicated and complex that actually it's weaker than what we had to start with.
You made the biggest point, right? So all of this safety and all the information, there's one key thread that runs through it all. If you were an owner of a building and you just simply asked, can you tell me what you designed was and what you built was, Just give me that information. I'll be a happy person. And are you compliant to whatever code or regulation? Actually, they're not asking for anything they shouldn't be asking for anyway. Except as a construction industry, we don't know how to deliver it to them. We've been doing bits of paper and O&M manuals. We've been building stuff wrong, as the photographs that George put up earlier. Actually, what they're all asking for is, can I just, if you're going to build me a building, can you just tell me what you built? And when you come back to those fundamentals and you look at that highlight I've just showed you in terms of all those different working groups and how many people are working on different elements and the point of influence. Actually, if you're just going to hand over a building, what did you build? If we stick to that and say, right, well, actually, what information do they want from an FM point of view, from an operational point of view? So, yeah.
I mean, Paul, as well. I mean, look, I think you said this earlier, Mark, as well. The big thing is, in your analogy, Andy, on the Titanic's actually really good. I think that the big thing here is that a gateway one. My big thing on the early adopters is that, you know, no disrespect to clients, is they don't understand any of the products. They're relying on a design team to do something. You know, we still see this now where we'll have, you know, clients that will go through with a fire consultant and someone will go, it's a complicated building, do we need a QDR? And someone will go, no, we don't think we need one. You go, you definitely need one, just do it. Because that drives that 90% of your initial way you need to design the building. Because as we say, not every building is square as Part B depicts, is it? You know, so you've got to look at the engineering specifically to what you're designing. And that's all we're really talking about. And I think what, you know, I've tried to do in several groups, and I'm trying to do it here as well, is to get probably those key sort of 13 or 14 different standards for fields of application into a way where everyone goes, I now understand how it all links together. So you can do a bit, it's a bit easier on procurement at the start to make it simpler to understand what you need to buy and how you need to prescribe it. Because the quicker you do that, the better. And I think you probably could say, Andy, like you said there, is that one of the big things that's going to have to change probably is how we procure and how, you know, people see early engagement of products, because you can't keep kicking it to the point where you try and fit it, it doesn't work. It's just too late.
Yeah, because unless we coordinate that, then, you know, what's happening, as I understand it, is builders' work's being put into compartmentation, which then is
generic, George, isn't it? That's the problem.
It's in the wrong place. So presumably, if you then seal something that was created, that in itself is creating a potential flaw.
Yeah. It's all about what it's. I was Paul. It make you laugh, Paul. You know, it's all about the walls. Keep saying it's all about the walls. Get the wall types right and understand the rules of them. And then it's pretty much just about how the product fits.
Yeah,
that's where we're kind of falling down in 90% of the occasions. Even with like smoke shafts is a famous one, because we still see jobs coming in with, you know, smoke shafts built out of you know, shaft wall. It's a no-no. Shouldn't be doing it. So.
And the other thing, the knock-on effect, I think Ian McKilwee from FIS was saying that they're doing some research at the moment on fire doors, and also on partitioning, and I think he said that 17% of partitioning is rework, which is, and he's said basically there's a 10% problem in terms of labour, skilled labour in doing dry lining, and he said if we cut half of the defects, then we'd eliminate the problem that we've got on labour.
Yeah.
So there's lots of different knock-ons. Okay, so we've obviously got to. I have to dive off to a Zero meeting in a moment, but obviously you can carry on. I think we're running until 12:30 or sooner, whenever people are ready to. I found this very helpful. I've got a couple of things I'd just like to cover. One is that in the design group meeting a couple of weeks ago, we went through the. Andy was talking earlier about the standardization of information. I think I've explained before, I mentioned it in my presentation, the free templater tool that we built with the BRE. So BIM4Housing has now got an instance of that, and we can populate it with whatever we want. So the templater allows us to create standard data sets for asset types that can be used to standardize the way products are described, and also any other information. So tasks, information about buildings and things like that. Again, it's all free, and we're working with the BRE and also the Zero Construct group, for example. It's a data dictionary application, and it allows us to determine what information is needed by whom at what stage and what we're going to do with it. Now, the tool is empty. Well, it's not empty. It's been populated with IFC4. So it's got all of the BIM data standards, and we've also populated it, Mark, with the EDP information, EPD information that we've been able to get hold of. So we've got some environmental work in there as well. But obviously we now need to get other people involved in it as well. So if there's anybody that's a data geek that's interested in that side of things, I'm very happy to include you in that work that we're doing with the design group. So does anybody fancy that? Anybody want to put their hands up for it? Silence. Ah, Christine, hi. Good. Okay, definitely involve you in that, Christine.
Thank you.
And the other question I got was Digital Construction Week. Is anybody going already? Yeah. Asif, would you mind sitting on one of the tables on the? Are you going on the? Are you there on the Thursday?
I should be there on the Thursday. I will double check my days. I'd be more than happy to sit on the tables. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks. I'll come back to you with some details. Paul, you've already signed up.
I've signed up already for you. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Is anybody else planning to go to Excel? It's Excel on the 19th. No, perhaps not.
I think I'll probably go, or more than likely.
Okay, Jan.
Yeah, Jan speaking.
Sorry. Good. Okay. Well, in any case, do you like the idea of the approach that we're taking a risk and then running it through the process? If that interests you, then perhaps what we do is we may set up a little sub meeting, maybe for an hour, and get people's input to that, so that we've got the construction group's perspective on it, so that when we actually run the session, then we're informed by that, if that makes sense. And you might be able to promote it to your colleagues, because you may have colleagues that are, if you're not coming to Digital Construction Week, which I can quite understand that you probably wouldn't, but you might have colleagues that are coming. So if we send you the details, we've actually got a website for it, haven't we? So Richard, so we can share that with everybody, and you can sign up.
One thing I would say, George, is sometimes you can't necessarily isolate the risks into little compartments, because you've got to look at the holistic, the whole building as a, and one risk might be offset by something else somewhere else.
Absolutely, I fully agree, and in fact, that's actually the approach that we're taking. Yeah. The approach that we're taking is looking at things from a point of view of what's the risk, what are the mitigations that might be alleviating that risk, but also looking at what is a system. So a system might be the compartmentation system, but the system might be the whole building, and therefore what we want to try and do, ideally, what I'd like to try and get to is a situation where the interrelationship between these different elements can be simulated, so that we can bring the changes and use that to basically show the regulator, well, it's not just the regulator, it's us, isn't it, that we're delivering a safe building. Richard, can I hand over to you? And I'll.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks,
Hello,
George. See you
cheers.
soon, mate.
So
George.
following on from what George was saying about that, having kind of an interim meeting pre digital construction week, is there anybody that might be free for an hour maybe or something over the next couple of weeks if we could send out an invite? Would anybody be interested in doing that?
I can be free, Richard.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll just send out an invitation for Wednesday is Wednesday, say a Thursday in a couple of weeks, for an hour, Thursday morning, and we'll if you anybody who can come along, please do. Even if you just pop in for 10 or 15 minutes just to put your oar in, that'd be very, very helpful.
Yeah, fine, Richard.
Excellent, excellent. The other thing I wanted to say, George mentioned it. We're kind of moving forcefully now to actually set up the work stream on change management. Now, we obviously want a couple of representatives, ideally, from each working group. So, are there a couple of people in here that have a particular interest in that field, or see the particular value of it and want to learn more? You're on board, aren't you, Paul?
Yeah, I'm 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And anybody else has a particular interest in that?
Yeah, I'll sign up to that. I'm happy.
Sorry, who's that?
Jan again.
Jan, hi Jan,
Yeah,
great.
hiya.
Okay, just to make note of that, fantastic. We're looking to have the first meeting for that sometime over the next 3 or 4 weeks.
That's fine.
Be prior to Digital Construction Week, ideally. I think what I don't know if George actually said, so Paul is actually taking over as co-leader of the construction group. We're waiting for there's a mysterious other co-leader that we're waiting to hear back from, who's not a million miles from this meeting actually. So hopefully next time there'll be two people. So Paul, do you want to take over now?
Me, yeah.
Yeah, why not?
You know me, Richard. The more we can put in, the better, mate. So.
Fantastic. Okay, Matt. Right. Okay. Well, we've got 15 minutes left. So, Paul, anything you think we should be talking about right now?
I was going to say, what I'll do is this thing for your digital construction is Paul White. You still there as well, mate?
I'm still
Yeah.
here.
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
No other one.
Is there two Paul Whites?
There's two Paul Whites in this meeting. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So I did not realise that. My apologies. Sorry, my apologies.
How stupid of me to get it wrong that he thought it was me. Anyway.
So I do
Hasn't been
apologise,
boxed
Paul.
like Paul White has. No.
That's fact, because I think the other Paul White said he's been in a meeting recently where there was two Paul Whites, and obviously it's the same group. So hey ho. I was going to say, look, I've probably got a few things I can send over on the smoke thing. Okay, one of them's probably do with firefighting shafts as well, because I'm sure everyone's had the issue with ventilation going through firefighting shafts. But I'll send that over. I'll send it to you, Paul, as well, and it comes to one of the jobs you've been working on for us as well. So it's all the prescriptives in there against the different standards as well. So it'd be one that might be useful to you.
Yeah, sorry, it's Paul White, Mark II here. Not normally in the construction group. I'm sort of helping with the development group. So pardon me.
Nah, no problems, mate.
Sorry, is this Paul White? Is that Paul White from Enfield?
It's Paul White from Enfield. Yes.
Hi,
nice
how you doing?
Yeah. It's been a very
as opposed to me.
I have
Yes.
to say, yeah.
As opposed to other Paul White.
Yeah, so I know Paul. Obviously, ventilation smoke fire. I always get it wrong, Paul, don't I? We do enough work together. But I've got a good example for that. One of the jobs you've been working on actually on the firefighting shaft over the ventilation, which I think is quite useful. I was trying to do a technical note internally on it, so I'll send it over. But it gives all the prescriptive and what the issue was in it as well. So it's about smoke risk.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
So Paul McSorley, we'll get you over on Monday, the transcript and the video and sort of a minute's high points of the meeting. So that gives you a memory jogger, and the high points you can just send out as is if you want, or maybe you'll spot something we've missed and you want to add in or interpret, but it gives you an easier route than having to send out an email from scratch.
Perfect.
Anybody else got anything they want to add? Shall we do something really strange for BIM4Housing and finish early?
Finish early.
Yeah,
Nothing
we've
wrong
got
with
time
that.
for coffee. Okay, guys, great, excellent. Well, see you next time, and anybody who's in other groups, see you well shortly, no doubt.
Cheers, Richard.
Take care.
Thank you so much. All the
Thanks.
best. Take care, buddy.
Cheers.
Thanks, all.
Cheers, bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Cheers.
you. Bye bye.
Nice to meet you, Paul.